We're following the run-up to the president's 100th day in office. That would be this coming Saturday, the milestone coming along with the looming threat of a government shutdown. A new poll is showing his approval rating at a historic low. We're joined by our political and national security analyst. And David Chalian, look at these numbers. I'll put it up on the screen. Job approval for presidents at 100 days. Going back to President Kennedy, he was at 78%, Johnson 77%. You see the numbers there. Trump right now only at 42% job approval number. How does that influence his ability to carry out his agenda?
Well, it makes it tougher. There's no doubt about that. If he were in the 60s now, he might be having an easier time getting his agenda through Congress than he seems to be having. But Wolf, what we see in these polls overall is that Donald Trump's base is still very much with him. The folks who voted for him, they are not peeling away at all, really. And the other thing that we're seeing then, why is he at 42% then? Because he hasn't added at all. So this is a president who entered office on Inauguration Day at historic lows and had no honeymoon, therefore, couldn't get anything done big legislatively. His big travel ban promise is held up in the courts. And so now he comes to his 100-day mark, also at historic lows when compared to his predecessors at this point in their presidencies.
David Swerdlick, is the president so committed to U.S. taxpayers at least starting to fund the border wall with Mexico that he would risk a government shutdown by the end of the week?
I see signs that maybe they don't want to risk that shutdown. Well, over the weekend on the Sunday shows, I heard White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney say more than once that they were committed to border security, didn't say the words border wall as much. That suggests to me, not for sure, but that they may want to leave themselves some flexibility. At the end of this week, the end of their 100 days, I think they want to show that they've been firm on the issue, but not round things out with a government shutdown.
Seems to be a dramatic reduction, Phil Mudd, of the number of people illegally trying to cross into the United States from Mexico. But the president is clearly determined to go ahead with the wall when all is said and done. He says Mexico eventually will pay for it. U.S. taxpayers, though, will pay for it for the time being.
Well, we'll be dead when that happens. But in the interim, let's talk about the significance of the wall. You're right. There's a huge air gap in this country between the emotion of a campaign, let's keep immigrants out, which a lot of people voted for, and the facts on the ground. You cited them right. Radical reduction in immigration, and the other facts you look at, talking to experts in things like the narcotics world, in the general immigration world, drugs and gang members don't come through the desert. They come through Juarez, they come through San Diego, they come through aircraft bringing drugs into this country. So you can put a wall up, but if you think that's the answer to gangs and drugs in this country, the facts don't back it up.
You know, on this issue, the president seems determined to stick by the wall, even though many members of his own party, Republicans, are saying, you know what, maybe money could be spent better elsewhere.
And that's where he might run into problems with his own party. They're trying, the administration is really trying to cast this as them against the Democrats in Congress. In reality, there are a number of their members that aren't thrilled with this either, and that will, cause a lot more complication in an already very complicated issue to keep the government funded.
As you know, on another critically important issue, taxes, and everybody knows that's very important. David Chalian, the president says on Wednesday he's going to release the broad picture of his tax reform proposals, and already there are reports out there that corporate tax rates will go down from 35% right now to only 15%. It's going to be a tough sell.
It is going to be a complicated sell. This is exactly what he promised on the campaign trail, so he is following through on his promise to get that corporate rate down to 15%. But he's going to run into a problem here with Paul Ryan, with other members of his own party, because as you know, Wolf, they're not looking to pay for this. But President Trump is sort of okay with deficits. And we've had years of Republicans on the Hill really just deficit hawks saying you got to have your pay-fors. You can't keep racking up deficits. I know the White House says that this is going to just make the economy boom, and they're counting on that to help pay for it at the end. But that's not how you balance the books in Congress.
The Treasury Secretary, David Swerdlick, says, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin says the Trump administration's tax reduction plan will be paid for because the economy will grow at least 3% a year. So more money, revenue will be coming in to pay for those tax cuts.
Right. And Wolf, I think that's a little bit of an overpromise. We saw with some of the tax cuts that President Obama did in his first term, they had a mild stimulative effect. I don't think a lot of economists think that you're just automatically going to get the revenue gap made up by economic growth. They're really banking on selling that, as opposed to, as David was saying, trying to convince Republicans and Democrats in Congress that they may need to have some cuts to offset those.
What has a better chance of getting passed in the short term? These tax cuts he's going to be proposing, maybe as early as Wednesday, or the repeal and replace of Obamacare?
This week?
Not this week.
Okay.
Neither is going to be passed. Okay. I'm talking about the next several weeks or months.
It depends on the details, frankly. The health care bill that they are talking about is not very different at all from what failed to pass just a couple weeks ago. So that they will need to start from scratch on that, or make bigger changes than they are to get that passed, because no one has really moved at this point on health care. So maybe it's tax reform.
Tax reform has got a better chance.
Yeah, I would say, but that one's complicated too. Neither of these are easy.
And then there's a promise of infrastructure, $1 trillion infrastructure bill. Is that happening?
Like Jackie said, I think we got to find out. They got to get through this week first and get some basic blocking and tackling done.
Right.
Let's make sure there's no government shutdown this week.
Exactly.
That would be better. All right, there's more to discuss. Just ahead, growing frustration among key lawmakers over the slow pace of the Senate's Russia election interference probe. So what's behind long delays in collecting crucial documents and lining up key witnesses?
Outside foreign adversary.